welcome back to my second video of today. So this video is going to be on how to heat the pop-up roof. Now, when we first went away in the van, naively enough, I just assumed heating would not be an issue. I don't know why I thought that. It didn't occur to me that the upstairs will be cold in any way, but it can be. So it is a learning. And what happened was, so the first time we went away in the van, the very first time we ever went away in the van, we slept downstairs. And so you have the heating, and there's a bit of kind of figuring out how to use that heating system as well. It's very simple, but you kind of have to kind of figure it out. So what happened was, we went away, we slept downstairs, it was cold, we turned on the heating. The first time the heating comes on, it makes quite a loud roar. So if you're stealth camping, it's a bit of a giveaway. That's how I realised. So it's quite noisy, but once it gets up to temperature and once it gets up and running, if you have it set to say something like 2 or 3, I think it goes up to 6 or 7 temperature-wise. So if you go up to 2 or 3, the heating tends to tick over and it's not very noisy then at that stage. But it is burning diesel, and Vanessa, the wife, she complains. She can smell the fumes off it and she doesn't like it. She's a bit sensitive like that. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, but I'd say if you have the heating on and you have a window open, you will get some of the fumes. You will kind of hear them. You will smell them burning. It smells a bit like say an old lantern or something like that. That's the kind of the odor that you pick up off it. Anyway, so we were downstairs. We turned on the heating. It heated up the van. It was grand, no problem. Perfect. The next time we went away, we brought Christian with us, and we had him up on the roof, and he was frozen. So we brought him down, and I stepped up above, and I was frozen. I couldn't believe how cold it was. But effectively, when you think about it, all it is effectively a canvas tent with no insulation whatsoever. It's a single layer. And so it doesn't keep you warm at all. And the heat that is generated downstairs tends not to make its way up, because just the design of the van is that once the bed's down, you only have the opening here for people to get up and down, and the heat doesn't rise really. And I'd say even if it does rise, because you're so exposed up above, you're going to be cold. So what we did is we bought some good sleeping bags. Some nights we'd have to have, long johns. You might have to have a hat on because your head can get quite cold. What we find is we sleep our head up towards the front of the van, because at least then we're getting advantage of some of the heat that is generated coming up into the top. So we've kind of been trying to figure it out over time. Now, the obvious question is, why don't we just get a Cali topper? Why don't we get one of those things? And I think it's on the to-do list. I will get one, but we use it so infrequently that I just haven't gotten around to spending my money on it. Now, I spend my money on bits and pieces like that. I wouldn't have any problem buying it, but what I want to do is I want to buy one of those Cali toppers, but because we have the roof box and various aspects, what I want to do is I want to go and see one. I want to see the size of it. I want to see how much space it takes up. I don't want to go and buy one and it'll take up half the van. It would defeat the purpose of having one. So I want to see one before I buy it, and I think the only place I can buy them is online from the UK. I haven't seen one here in Ireland, so that's a bit of an issue. So anyway, cut to the chase. What happened then was, so we've been trying to figure out strategies as to how to heat up above, and what we'd resorted to is basically just wrapping up, having duvets on, having sleeping bags, and then having hats on and bits and pieces, sleeping up above. We leave Christian down here because he's only a little fella and we don't want him catching cold. If I'd say it was just myself and Vanessa way, we would sleep down here and we wouldn't put the roof up, and that's we'd keep the van warmer in that regard. Okay, so I'm a member of the VW California Club forum. It's a UK forum. It's very good. I get a lot of information from them, and I'm a VIP member, which I recommend. So you pay a subscription of about £10 a year and you get all additional information and stuff like that. So it's very good. But I saw somebody had an idea, and what they did was they used the heating system to heat up above. Now, the way the heating system works, and I'll show you the way the heating system works. Sorry, let's just get my camera. And I'm just showing, I have the camera here on the vents. So the vents work, there's 2 vents there. I think there possibly could be another vent. So those 2 vents blow out the hot air, and then that's all they do. They're basically, they just blow out hot air into the van, and it's obviously thermostatically controlled. There's a thermostat somewhere in the van. Once it's reached a certain temperature, I'm assuming, it switches off. The van's nice and toasty. no problem. But somebody had very cleverly used some of this stuff, right? So they used some of this stuff to send some heat up above into the upper area, which I thought was very clever. So the last time we were away, we did a video on it. We were away in Cong in County Mayo, and I said to myself, I went out to B&Q and I bought a roll of this stuff. So this was about €11, £10 thereabouts, something like that. And what I did was I bought a roll of this. Now it was trial and error, because I only saw the photograph and I didn't really kind of figure out how they went about doing it. I wasn't quite sure what I needed to do. Anyway, so I bought this. So this is 3 meters long, and what it is, it's a hose for taking. It's a hose for taking condensate, you know, like from a steam or a shower or something like that. And what I did then was I connected this end. So what I'll do is I'll do a bit of a video of me setting it up and then sending up, showing you what it looks like up above as well, right? So what I did was I connected this end to here. Now the thing is, how do you go about connecting it? That's the problem, right? And I wasn't sure what to do. So while I was pondering in my mind, what I thought was I would somehow hook it to the vent, and then what I would do is the other end I would anchor up above and send the hot air. And it was purely experimental. I really wasn't sure if this was going to work or not. So with a bit of trial and error, now I put a bit of tape here on the end, just to give it a bit of rigidity, but I don't think that's necessary. I don't think you need to do that. I think it's rigid enough that if you left no tape on this end, I think it would work just as fine. I thought maybe it would help me with the molding of it around the shape, because the fan or the vent there is on a corner. So what I was trying to do is capture as much hot air as possible going up above. That's why I didn't bother this end, because this is for the upper end. But I don't think you need to do that. And what I did then was I created, because somebody asked Vanessa on Instagram, how did I connect it? So again, with a bit of trial and error, what I was doing was I had connected this hook into here. I connected the hook into this part here. But what I found through trial and error was, because you can't unhook it then as quickly as you want, so what I found through trial and error was I hooked this piece through the vent. So this piece just catches in the vent, in one of the louvers, I suppose, you know, so one of the ridges. And then what I do then is basically just hook this onto here. Right, so this sits on the ground to a certain extent, and then this just hooks into here, and then through gravity and so on, what it does is it sort of stays in position. That's what it does, right? And the reason I did it that way is because then I can just take this off and I can leave the hook in here. What I was trying to do originally was, when I was doing this, was you're trying to unhook it with the hose attached, and it doesn't work quite so well. So this works really, really well. And then up above then was, what I did was I put a bit of tape around this end, just to give it a bit of strength, I suppose. And then what I did then is I put this hook, and I put the hook actually through one of the wire pieces here, you know, inside. And I did this, so I put the tape on it just so it doesn't rip, because I thought that this kind of stuff might get a bit fragile and rip as well. And then the hook's up above in the roof for the safety net. What I do then is I hook this up above, and then this just basically hangs out of the ceiling, sending the hot air up, and then this captures the hot air and from that end. Now, so if you watch the video from Kong, you'll see it in action, and you'll see Christian dramatically explaining how hot it gets, right? So now, the thing I'd say to be careful of, and I'm a bit nervous of it, to be honest, I think what I'll do is, if I see a metal one of these, you can see these in foil, I think I'll replace it with a foil one, right? The reason being, the learning is, that vent gets very hot. So I had the heating set to 7. It was a cold night, and I had the heating set to 7, and up close it's very hot, really, really hot. I'm not sure exactly how hot it is, but I would say, you know, kind of hot enough to probably, if you left something accidentally there, it could easily melt it. What I noticed was this was getting very, very hot, and the tape had started, the glue had started to melt and had started to kind of come away. Hence, I think that this isn't necessary. Now, what my obvious fear is a fire, right? Because that's the last thing you want. I mean, you're going to have this on when you're asleep. You'll be out cold. Christian's down here, we're up above, and you know the van goes on fire, and we're all dead. That's my biggest fear. So, through trial and error while I was awake, what I noticed was that if I turned it down to 2 or 3, right? So having it down to temperature 2, which is normally what I'd never turn it up to 7 anyway. Normally have it down to 2 or 3, and that's perfect. Otherwise the van gets just too hot. So 2 to 3 is the right temperature, I find, for keeping the inside of the van nice and warm. And what it does then is it comes on and goes off as it's in the heating, and you don't notice it, and it doesn't have that kind of initial setup, that initial blast and noise that you get. It just kind of ticks over. And then this end doesn't get too hot, but what it still does is basically this end captures the hot air. Hot air rises, it's obviously being fanned out there as well, and it travels up here and then it comes out up above. And it actually does work, because we set it up, I turned it on, I had it set to 2, possibly 3, I'm not sure, I can't remember. Had it set to 2 or 3, had it connected up, and it was lovely and warm up above, and I fell asleep. I didn't think I would. I fell asleep, and we were up there and it was warm. Vanessa was giving out because she doesn't like the fumes, but it was warm up above the first time ever. It was lovely and toasty, and so it worked. It worked really, really well. We'd no issues, and there was no fire, thankfully. But again, you know, I'm stressing how important that piece is, that I do think that I will replace this because of that heat part there as well. That's why I think as well with this hook, it just keeps it back a little bit. I just think it just keeps it off it, that I think it was on top of the vent, too tight on top of the vent, could cause a fire. So I think, again, I am going to replace this, I think, at some stage as well. Just to be careful. That's just to be super careful. I'm very vigilant when it's on. So it worked. We fell asleep. It was grand. The downside is a lot of the heat that heats up down here ends up above. It's an obvious thing. I didn't think about it at the time. But then what happened was when we came down here, it was cold. So down here was cold. So clearly it was trapping all the hot air. Now there's 2 vents. The smaller one, I don't know, it does send out air, but I think the other one is the main vent. So it was actually cold down here, and Christian was complaining of the cold. So it's an interesting thing that the heat went up above, and we were warm, but it was cold down here. I was quite surprised by that. So I think what I'll have to do is I'll have to figure out some way of warming the van. You know, what I think maybe, you know, I'll have to kind of try and figure out how to get this so that some of the air is shared. Maybe holes. Maybe if I put holes in the vent or something like that, what it might do is it might send some of the hot air out. Something like that. I don't know. I think I'll just have to experiment over time and then figure. Because I think if there was holes in it, I'd be nervous that this thing, the structure of it, would start to fall apart. But I think if I put small holes in it, what it might do is it might share some of the air up above and then some of the air back down to here. I mean, that's probably makes sense. I think it'd probably be better to have it up, the holes probably halfway up, because I think if I put them too close here, the forces of the vent would probably just end up sending the hot air out here and it won't send it up above. Anyway, so look, that's going to be trial and error. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video here, and then what I'll do is I'll hook it up and put it in place. I have the roof up. I'm not going to start up the heater. There's just no point, because if you watch the video with Christian, you'll see. But it does work. It does work. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here.